This is Raythe from Raythe Reign. I'm an author of serialized gay romance fiction. Every week on this podcast, I'll be reading a chapter from one of my gay fantasy shifter serials called Dragon's Reign. I'll explain at the break how you can find out more about this story and others I write. So let's get to it. Chapter 128. Darkness.
He's here. He's gone. What an exit.
Ilarion offered Valerius a hand up from the ground.
Did you see what Caden did to that bastard's tail? Ice! Pure ice!
Valerius grasped Ilarion's hand and scrambled to his feet. He'd slung the rifle over his back, the strap laying across his bare chest. He still might need it. He'd keep it until Raziel returned.
Caden Iolair, kick the Behemoth's butt. Literally,
Ilarion chortled. The Green Dragon King kicked part of the tail, which was, as he had said, a block of ice, out of the room and into the courtyard. It hit a wall and ricocheted against other chunks before being stopped by the largest piece. That was the base of the tail, where it had sheared off from the Behemoth's main body. Blood smeared half of it, and it was starting to melt, leaving a pool of smelly biological fluid. Jahara picked up one of the chunks of ice. You can see the veins and arteries inside it, even the scales. But this isn't frozen flesh at all. It's just ice, like an ice sculpture, Jahara said with awe in her voice and eyes.
Like no ice sculpture I've ever seen,
Anwar murmured as he fished around the ice, picking up a scaled piece before tossing it away. And we thought Caden and Iolair were the weakest of us, May remarked with a bark of laughter. She shook her head. Ha! I'm glad we were wrong. He's just learning, Esme said as she rearranged her hair back into its careful coif. Her dress was torn and ripped, but she still looked regal nonetheless. Who knows how powerful he'll be in time? Indeed, and he's learning at record speed, also, thankfully. Jahara mused as she twisted and turned the ice in the light. There was blood running down Jahara's right temple, bruises on her knees and left thigh, and raw scrapes on her bare shoulders. But she appeared not to notice them at all, even as her wise woman fanned out into the group and began to clean wounds. Valerius felt the sting of cuts all over the bottom of his bare feet and shoulders from the broken glass, but he waved away help. Once Raziel returned, everything would heal. Now that he'd seen Caden, he knew that was going to happen soon. He ached and was tired, but the bone-deep exhaustion was gone. He had a feeling that this meant that Raziel was doing better too. He wished he'd had the time to ask Caden. He was certain there was a story to be told there. Caden could cause us to shift. I suppose he went after the Behemoth now to do just that. Send the blasted thing back to the spirit realm and solve our problem of it blowing up a huge chunk of Valerius' territory, Tez said as he dusted dirt and rubble off of him and Kayla. Yes, that's what Caden said, or I think he did. My ears were ringing, Valerius said and grimaced as he strode outside into the courtyard. He wanted to see Caden and Iolair. He wasn't afraid for them, strangely. He had a sense that Caden was different, more confident, more composed, more accepting fully of what he was. Caden had always been capable, but there had been this sense of completeness and comfort in what he was that had not been there before. The others followed his bloody footprints outside. Valerius, you're bleeding quite a bit, Tez remarked. You really should get that seen to. It will be fine. We'll all be fine soon, Valerius said as his eyes scanned the dark for a white, glowing draconid form. Bleeding or no, healing or no, he would not have gone in and been tended to with Caden out there. He needed to see his lover.
There!
Ilarion's left hand shot out towards the mid.
Caden and Iolair have that ugly bastard down already.
The beautiful white dragon hovered above Dragonstrike Square. Caden, Iolair. Thank the gods, Valerius thought. His heart swelled in relief and joy. They were all right. They were more than all right. They seemed in charge. But then he looked farther down. In the center of the square was a large furrow where the Behemoth had crash landed. Even from here, he could tell that it wasn't just rock, and dirt piled up on either side of the hideous hydra. Is it still a hydra with one head? Valerius thought. It is a particularly hideous dragon. No, not a dragon. I do not know what that is. In the square. All those people, Jahara whispered. She dropped the chunk of ice and held onto the railing. Death. Couldn't be helped, Esme said softly. We knew we weren't going to get out of this night without casualties. I thought the casualties would be us, Tez admitted, and Kayla put a comforting arm around his waist. It's not over yet, May remarked darkly.
Oh, I rather think it is, Alarion chuckled. Can't you feel it? Caden and Iolair's gift. It's in the rising of the storm. Look!
Lightning cracked open the sky. The helix with the red and white was still slowly spinning. The lightning seemed to come from it. There was a terrible, bone-shaking roar from the behemoth. And then there was a light. A burst of white light that left Iolair and pulsed outwards. The light spread over the behemoth's body. The behemoth's head reared back as if denying the call, the command. And then there was another pulse. The behemoth's body quivered. A shudder went all the way through it. The flesh began to blur, and then the behemoth was gone. The white dragon darted in and caught people that were falling. The behemoth must have grabbed hold of some before it simply winked out of existence. But no, it still existed. It had just shifted back to the horde. He caught them. Jahara clasped her hands under her chin as if in prayer. But not all of them, Kayla squinted. There are others, naked, running into the crowd.
The horde, Anwar breathed. Of course they're still here, and still under the behemoth's control until our dragons destroy the creature.
It doesn't look like all of them, though. Just a few, Kayla said as she squinted. Unless the others are dead already. Is that good, that there are so few, then? Tez asked. Well, probably good, because Caden and Iolair can handle them alone. But that means a lot of those souls won't have bodies to go back to.
Caden and Iolair shouldn't be alone, though. Where are Shioni and the others? Esme asked. My night vision is terrible. Getting old is truly for the birds.
Age has written the wisdom of your life on your body, old friend. There is no shame in that, Jahara said, patting Esme's shoulder. Valerius's eyes went from Caden in the square to something nearer, the bridge. Like the others, he was wondering where Shioni, Rose, Wally, and Marban were, not to mention Simi Nagoye and the rest of the Claw. Why had they not come up to try and fight the behemoth when it was outside the throne room? He was glad they hadn't. They would have been desperately hurt, but still, where were they? And then he saw.
Shioni.
Valerius breathed, and he was moving before he consciously thought about it. The others called out after him, but he didn't stop, and he had no thought or breath to tell them what he'd seen. They would seen it soon enough themselves. The wise woman cried out in concern as he flew past them and down the hallway and then out of high reach. He was out in the entrance courtyard, stones cutting into his already bleeding and bruised feet. The gate was still closed.
Open it! Open it!
Valerius shouted at the Claw, who stared down at him from the 2 guard towers flanking the gate with open mouths. Here, King Valerius, come through this door. It was Nagoye who spoke. There was a door cut into the gate that could be opened even if the main gate remained shut. She opened it and gestured for him to join her. She was naked and her dark brown skin was covered in splatters of blood, but it did not appear to be her own. Or she had already healed as her lion spirit had protected her. But there was exhaustion written in her handsome, dark face and eyes.
Shioni,
he said in explanation. I know, she said, and stepped aside as he ducked through the gate. She kept the horde from getting to the gate. And he could see that. She was lying prone in the midpoint of the bridge. There was none of the horde between her and the gate. But on the other side were scores of moaning and writhing people. The Claw were trussing up each of the horde at the feet and ankles, making sure they couldn't get away. Even when the human souls were returned to the horde bodies, they would have to separate the innocent from the truly guilty. With relief, he caught sight of Simi leading the roundup of the prisoners. There was blood splashed on his face and bare chest, but the lean, tawny body appeared unharmed. Nagoye continued. At first, Shioni was flying down and grabbing those who were sent off the sides of the bridge, stopping them from being killed. Nagoye shook her head as if she thought that was foolish, and he understood why. The horde was still possessed by the Behemoth's evil soul, a monster soul. But then we were overwhelmed, and she landed in the middle of them. He saw what looked like blast marks etched in the stone as he hobbled towards his counselor and his best friend. Tears were running down his face, and he hadn't even noticed. She had to be all right. She had to be. Wave after wave kept coming, but she held them back. I don't know how. Nagoye's voice held wonder and deep respect from one warrior to another, and she didn't kill one of them. It was more than they deserved. Some of them are innocent, Larry said, but he wasn't sure if he cared if they had been at that moment. But then he reminded himself that in the horde were Landry's body and her brother's as well. They deserved to be saved. It wasn't until some of them shifted into that thing that she was taken down, Nagoye said with great bitterness. It cut her with its filthy claws. She didn't back away, though. She stayed and fought until the end. Yes, he swallowed.
Did you know that you can get some of my gay romance books for free? Every month, I have at least one book free to download, right from Amazon, so you can easily read it on any device. But these books can only be free for 5 days at a time. If you don't want to miss out, just sign up for my mailing list, and I'll send you an email whenever there's a free book available. The link to the sign-up form is in the description down below.
King Valerius, Rose cried when she saw them approaching. Tears were streaming down her face, and her lower lip quivered. She's really hurt, but says we shouldn't move her. We've called for a doctor, but...
It's no good. These wounds can't be helped that way, Wally said, an unnatural frown on that usually comically humorous round head.
Valerius quickened his step. Wally's bare, fuzzy butt moved to the side as he approached. Marban's wizened form was revealed. The old swarm shifter was holding one of Shioni's hands and stroking it. Valerius's heart lodged in his throat. Shioni's naked golden body was covered in wounds, deep gouges, slashes across her throat, her abdomen, and her legs. Hydra claws. No. Shioni, it's me, I'm here, Valerius said. He dropped down to his haunches by her side and took her other hand in his. She gripped it back weakly for just a moment, before the strength seemed to just run out of her, and her hand went limp in his. He could see how deep the gouges went across her throat and chest. He could see white bone and the glistening outsides of organs. The wounds were healing, but not as they should, and not near fast enough to save her. Valerius felt sick and helpless with grief. Some kind of poison. And then the claws. Shioni gasped out an explanation, knowing what he was thinking before he said anything, as she always did. Where is that claw with the doctor in a blanket? Rose cried. She's going into shock. She's freezing. All of them were shifted, so they had no clothes to offer. I will go, fast as the wind, Nagoye promised, turned on her heel and headed back to the castle. Valerius closed his eyes. That grief made him want to shriek. But he had to be strong for her, find a way forward for her. He forced his eyelids open and made his voice calm and soft. That's why you're not healing. The poison? Yes, I see. We need to flush your wounds and perhaps... No, she whispered, and blood bubbled up on her lips. Can't fix it that way. Wally's right. Valerius wanted to scream that Wally wasn't right, that he was a rat shifter, and what the hell did he know about the Behemoth or Sphinx shifters for that matter? Nothing, less than nothing. And yet Shioni was agreeing with him. He wiped the blood away from her lips, keeping that calm tone that was so unnatural for him. How can we fix it then? There must be a way, he thought. I am not giving up. The sun. I need the sun, she whispered. Her eyes were unfocused. She was staring up at the night sky as if she didn't see or more likely saw beyond it. He did not like that at all. In the sun, I am reborn.
but not at night, not in the dark.
Like a phoenix, Marban said, the first words he'd spoken. His voice was thick with emotions that Valerius would have thought him incapable of just last month. She gave a bloody smile that threatened to wrench Valerius's heart out of his chest.
Yes, something like that. Only the sun will fix this. How long before morning?
Valerius looked up at the sky. It was midnight black and studded with stars. The sun was ages away. He looked back down at her wounds, then up into Marban's suddenly very old eyes.
She will not last until morning,
Valerius realized. They all knew it. Rose covered her mouth with both hands to stop the involuntary cry of grief that wanted to escape her lips and turned towards the edge of the bridge so that Shioni would not glimpse her crying. Wally's shoulders curled further inwards until he more resembled a ball than ever. Marban patted Shioni's hand. Not long now, Shioni. You just need to hold on a little longer. Imagine the sun's warmth. It's coming. Her lips twitched into something that was between a smile and a grimace.
You used to be such a better liar, Marban. Are we making you soft?
The old swarm shifter let out a cough that sounded suspiciously like a surprised laugh. Soft? Me? Never.
Good, she said softly and coughed. More blood frothed on her lips. We can't have that. Valerius needs a strong hand.
Valerius jerked at her words. She was saying goodbye. She was handing over the baton to Marban as sole counselor.
You are the strong hand, Shioni, Valerius said. Marban is the one that plies me with wine and ambrosia and very bad ideas. You need to save us from ourselves.
No, she said gently.
No, I know. You will be fine. Not without you.
Tears were falling so thick and fast he couldn't blink them back.
The wheel turns, Valerius. I will be back, she said, and another fit of coughing had her body practically convulsing. The wounds opened further, and more of her life's blood spilled out onto the cobbles. Rose's shoulders shook. Wally swiped tears from his cheeks. Marban trembled as he fought to hold in his grief. Valerius held his hands over those wounds as if he could close them, but he couldn't. Only the sun could, only daylight.
Daylight. It is always daylight somewhere. On the east coast it will rise.
Of course! Valerius jumped to his feet and raced to the side of the bridge.
Valerius, what are you doing? Rose asked.
Not what, but who. Caden and I are there.
Valerius spun around to look at Marban and Wally.
If we cannot have the sun come to Shioni, then we must bring her.
Shioni to the sun, of course. Iolaire will fly her. That is the only way. Marban nodded furiously. That is the only chance. Her wounds were terrible. Valerius knew that it would be a rough ride for Shioni in Iolaire's claws or on the white dragon's back, even if it was done carefully. But Marban was right. This was the only chance she had. He turned back to the edge of the bridge and craned his neck as far as he could. He had to see the square. He had to get Caden's attention, but the white dragon was nowhere in sight, and he could not reach Caden's mind. Maybe a car could get him there in time to reach Caden, but there was no time for that. No time. He spun back around and looked between Rose and Marban.
Can one of you fly to Caden? Let him know. There's no time to get there on foot or by car, and I don't know when he will return.
I can do better than that, Marban said. While he might not notice us, he will notice you.
I cannot fly right now, Marban, and I can't ride on a wasp's back,
Valerius reminded him dryly. Don't be so hasty. You very well can, the old swarm shifter said, with a wag of his finger that was stained red with Shioni's blood.
Marban, we have no time to debate.
Do you trust me? Marban asked. And then, as if realizing how insane that question was, he grimaced. Of course you don't.
I do. Valerius interrupted. I trust you, Marban.
The old swarm shifter blinked.
Those words seemed to shock him into silence. Valerius was about to speak to rouse him when Marban shook himself and said, I'll need your help, Rose. Between the two of us, he can fly on the backs of insects. Fly him? I'm with Valerius here. You're swarm shifters, not dragons, Wally cried. Our swarms are as big as dragons, Rose said, evidently understanding what Marban intended. I'll do it. Of course I'll do it. Caden and I will are on the square, Valerius said, wondering exactly what they had in mind. We will get you there, Marban said. Valerius went over and tenderly kissed the back of Shioni's hand. It was cold, so cold. But her eyes were open, though glassy, and she stared up at him as if memorizing his face. But she would see it again. She would survive. I need you to hold on, Shioni, Valerius begged her. Aulaire is going to fly you to daylight. You just need to hold on. I want to see the sun rise once more, she said, and then closed her eyes. For one horrific moment, he thought she'd died, but he realized she was just sleeping. Would she wake again, though? Nagoye returned at that moment with a doctor who ran a critical eye over Shioni. He directed that she be covered with a light silver blanket that would keep her as warm as a parka. It was clear that the physician thought this was a lost cause, but he was professional and kind. Go, get Caden, don't worry. Nagoye and I will stay with her on the dock, Wally assured him. Good, thank you, Valerius said, wrenching himself from Shioni's side as he, internally, begged and prayed that it would not be for the last time. All right, I'm ready. Marban, Rose. Both Rose and Marban tipped their heads back to the sky and closed their eyes. In a second, they disappeared, and a haze of insects took their places. Wasps and bees in the thousands, insects that could sting, insects that were feared, but not this time. He blessed every single one of them. They surrounded Valerius. He could feel their bodies bumping against his own, every single inch of him. The air heated, becoming almost hot, and then his feet were leaving the bridge, as if he were floating on a warm cloud. Valerius nearly opened his mouth in awe, but he kept his lips tightly shut, as he didn't want to swallow any of the insects. He chuckled, though, internally, as the thick cloud of insects carried him off the bridge and started to fly him to the square. Hold on, Shioni, he prayed. I will make sure you see the sun again in this life, not the next.
I hope you're enjoying Dragon's Reign so far. Dragon's Reign is free for you to enjoy, but not free for us to make. There is a whole team working with me for audio editing, artwork, graphic design, and custom music. Most YouTube channels and podcasts have sponsors and take ads, but because of the kind of content we make, we can't run ads or get sponsors. Instead, we have other ways you can support me and the team behind this gay romance audiobook. One easy way is to buy or borrow my books from Amazon. They are all gay romance set in alternative worlds with vampires or shifters and other magical beings. You may not know that even if you borrow books with your Kindle Unlimited subscription at Amazon, they are free for you, but they still earn us money. The books are published under the name Ex Aratare, which actually means Raythe in Romanian. And if you love audiobooks, you can get professionally narrated versions of every one of my books on audible.com. The link to my author page is in the description below, as well as to the first book of the series I think you'll really like. Thank you so much for your support. People like you enable me and the team to keep writing these stories of gay romance, magic, monsters, and true love, and producing this very fun podcast for everyone. Thank you.